Critical care in that era was actually quite important. Again, when we compared our data with the Ciliate data, we've got a significant benefit for ECMO. And this is the sort of diagnoses we had at that time. Many reckoned that ECMO was interesting but not proven. So we ran out of money. We started in '89. By 1992, we'd run out of charitable funds to do ECMO, so we ended up having to go to our Member of Parliament to ask the question of the Prime Minister, basically, what are you going to do about ECMO in Leicester? He made some quite banal comment in the chamber of the House of Commons to do that, but the end result is that the problem was closely examined, and the end result was that they said, we'll fund a properly randomized controlled trial to test neonatal ECMO. And this was done between 92 and 95, recruited 185 patients, and basically showed significant survival benefit. Now, one of the things that was different about this trial to all the other trials, and actually set the benchmark for doing such investigations in the future, is that we didn't just look at survival, because there actually are things worse than death. And a severely damaged outcome is not good for anybody. So the end point for this trial was not death or discharge from hospital. It was intact survival to 1 year. So they had to be A, alive at 1 year, and B, they had to have a neurological assessment which gave them at least average ability reports, because the 1 year intact survival obviously took a year of follow-up to achieve. Now, the other thing that was different about this trial is most trials in critical care situations, once the end point has been reached, that's the end of it. These patients are still under follow-up in the UK, and this is the 4-year follow-up. So you're now able to test these children as they were then, 4 years old, much better than you can at 1 year. So that there is a continuous follow-up of these, not only of their neurology, but also their respiratory health. Because one of the things that is significant about this is that actually those who survive with conventional treatment have actually trials have been looked at for this group of patients, but it's never been achieved. All we can manage with this group is to do matched pairs analysis. And this is using the registry of ELSO and the Pediatric Critical Care Study Group. Both these organizations have significant databases, and you can match pair analyze groups of cases. So if you do that, you end up with a better survival in those institutions where ECMO is available than only conventional treatment is available. It's very unlikely that there'll ever be a proper randomized trial of pediatric ECMO. And this is the other data from that same analysis, and it showed basically that in the ICU scenario in this organization, if you had ECMO availability in your institution, you were significantly more likely to survive. And this is what ECMO looked like in the 1990s. This is our coordinator Hillary at the time. Fairly simple circuit. This is a Kolobot type device. There was for those who were old enough to remember, those things there were called Galveston diamonds. They created clot rather than solve problems, so we cut them out at the end. But this is what the circuit that basically people were using up until about 2009, both for adults and for children. This is the adult version of it. This is multi-system failure. This is CCRT. This is a Mars liver, intravenous alimentation, and an ECMO circuit. So you can't get much more intensive care than that. Now, 2009, I've mentioned already, it was a defining year really in ECMO history, because the CSER trial was published. You've already seen some of the results. But more importantly, new technology became widely available, and it also coincided with this H1N1 influenza pandemic. So the Caesar trial was a fully randomized trial. It has its defects, and I'll allude to some of those in a minute, but it was of potentially reversible respiratory failure with a Murray score of greater than 3, or decompensated hypercapnia, that is with a pH of less than 7.2. It was adult patients only. So when you look at how all the data shakes out, you end up with a p-value of 0.03 with 63% survival as against 50% survival at that point, which is the first endpoint. And then it was again intact survival at 6 months in this case, without severe disability, and it was 63 against 47. Now there were a number of problems. One of the issues was that our conventional care, it was on the basis of intention to treat, but 17 of the 90 ECMO patients never received ECMO. They received intensive care only. And this 14 out of 17 actually amounts to the best survival for conventional care ever reported. And of course, if you have that in this thing, and then you take those patients out, then your survival appears to disappear. So, although it proves the point, there are issues with this trial. The other issue, which went the other way, was we had 5 patients die in transport, which had never happened before. And that's again a consequence of the trial, because the trial randomization process took several hours. And that's actually, the patients were then worse by the time they were included in the trial. So that counted against us as well. So there were a number of methodological issues, but at the end of the day, you can only do what you can do. Now the new circuits are quite different. This is our version of the 2009 circuit. This is a little Medos oxygenator. The Centrimag or Pedivas head, and you've got the patient only just up there. So you can construct these circuits so that even for a neonate, you do not need to blood prime. So the current circuit volume is 120 cc. So for a neonate, that's remarkable. And it's not that much bigger for an adult. It's only about 250. So either way, you can clear fluid prime these circuits, which makes a number of issues much better, not least that you can make them readily available very quickly. So this is the adult version. This is the Medos Hilite 7000, which has already been shown, and again the adult version of the Centrimag. It's very compact, it's very short. The mean transit time for a red cell through the adult circuit is 6 seconds. So it's not surprising that clotting issues in these circuits are far less than they were before. This is the other version. You've got the pump at the back there, the Mackay system. Again, it's a very neat, compact system, and completely unlike what you saw either in 1970 or more recently in the 1980s and 90s of our more complicated circuit. This is just another look at it. And this is the Novolung version. Now, out of the swine flu actually came better scientific data, probably, than we got from the randomized trial. So this is the data that the UK group put up, which was reported in JAMA. During the swine flu epidemic, all the data for conventional and ECMO patients was prospectively collected. So at the end of it, we could actually do an analysis. And there were all sorts of reasons why people didn't get ECMO in the UK during that period of time. Some related to capacity, but more often just that the patients weren't referred, often because of bias against ECMO. But you ended up with an ability to do a really very detailed analysis of all the physiological factors, all the other patient comorbidities and so on. And you could end up by doing a matching, which was done in more than one way. And whichever way you looked at it, you got a significant benefit for ECMO. Similar data came out of Australia and other places. But this, to me, as far as adult ECMO is concerned, is much more convincing evidence for the use of ECMO than anything we've got out of randomized controlled trials. Now, the other important thing that's happened post-2009 is this sort of appearance of an ECMO patient is much more frequent than it used to be. This young man was gassed in Afghanistan and has got pulmonary fibrosis. On top of his pulmonary fibrosis, he got a chest infection. Now, if you try and ventilate this guy, you can't. It's like ventilating a brick. But with his own muscle power, he can actually breathe and oxygenate himself. But when he gets sick, he can't clear his CO2. So there he is. He's on vena-venous ECMO through an Avalon catheter in the neck, and he's self-ventilating, and he's getting a combination of oxygen and CO2 clearance from the circuit. And we did this on him on 2 occasions before he went for a lung trial. And that's where I'll leave it. But the history has been very interesting.